All right, welcome to another BS Friday, everybody. This is Dave Cooper, and we are outside of Denver, Colorado. And man, are we having a good time. Mark, I bet you can't guess where I am today.
Well, I got to hang out with you before the show. Should I tell people where you are?
We should tell people where we're at because they have been amazing hosts, and we've been able to walk through this factory and highlight some of their products and what we're going to do in some upcoming shows and some BS Friday shows. We learned a little bit of building science while we're here. So everybody, we are hanging out at Alpen High Performance Products. And behind me is one of their Alpen windows. And Mark, before the show, you were talking about that window a little bit, and you were all crazed about the new products that they have, right? Almost an R15, right? They can get up to in the center window, R15 on a window.
The quality of Alpen is amazing, Dave. Like so many people in our industry search for a European supplier. Yeah. This is right here on our back door, and you're in their facility right now.
I am in their facility, and they gave up their conference room, and it is a busy place. I mean, the factory is full. It's wonderful seeing all the people working. And then we also have behind me, this whole office is full. So we're loving it. So I thought this was a great place to do BS Friday from, because they are all about building science. They are about high performance windows, high performance homes. And you're right. No need to go to Europe when you can come right here to Denver, Colorado, and get the same product, the same windows with all the cool tilt in, tilt out features that you see in Europe that you do not see in a lot of the American made windows. And you get the benefits of the building science and the high R value.
Dave, those windows allow for the things we always talk about, the attributes, comfort, right?
That's right.
Quiet. And then beyond the durability and the wonderful function, it's a level of safety because you're able to keep your window open when you're not home. It's just brilliant.
Right.
They're wonderful people. I was a guest of theirs for the Green Build Conference, thanks to our friend Doug Press, and so happy you're there today. Shout out to Alpen. Way to go, brother.
Yeah, love it, love it. All right, Mark, but we also have a big show today. This is show number 52 straight weeks of BS Friday. We have now completed a full year on all 6 Dave Cooper Live shows, and this has been one of the best shows, and you put so much energy and effort into setting up these shows, Mark. I just want to give you a heartfelt thank you, because the amount of work you have put in to bring some of these speakers and guests, especially the guests that we have today, Zack. Think about it. These are the top players in our industry. They're doing amazing things, and we have so many wonderful people that now tune into this show every Friday to learn a little BS.
So, Dave, the first word I'll say is teamwork and collaboration, right? Allows it to happen. And then a phrase that we don't use as often as we should is it takes a village, right? And our audience is the motivator when we have to check in during the week and during the weeknights when your family needs you for this or my company needs me for that. It's the village, it's the audience that gives us that energy. So great to be a part of Dave Cooper Live, and thrilled that we made it to 52. Bless your heart, brother.
52. Love you, man. All right, listen, everybody. We are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and
Twitch.
And why are we live on Twitch?
Oh, man, Greg Ugoldi, Mr. NAHB, Mr. Sustainability, says the cool kids are learning tech, and we have to be there to train them.
That's right. Listen, the young people aren't coming into our industry, so we went to Twitch because that's where they are at. All the gamers, virtual reality players, they're all there. So, and it's great. We got some people watching us from Twitch today. So if you're new to this channel, we thank you so much for tuning in. You're going to learn a whole lot. And you know what? There's a lot of cool things to learn in our industry. Everything from technology, virtual reality, to super wicked smart architects and all kinds of stuff. So with that said, I think before we bring Zack on, we should bring somebody else on. What do you think?
If we didn't have a surprise for Zack, I think he would feel let down. So I'll do the drum roll and you press the magic buttons.
All right. Michael Ingui. How are you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing well. What's going on, folks? Cheers.
Hey, listen, it's always awesome to have you back on the show. You're a leader in this industry when it comes to passive house design, and you've been on the show a few times now. And every time you come on the show, it just puts a smile on my face. And I mean, and for you, it's just not you; it's a family affair.
True.
Right?
Thanks for having me.
You're like a cult, I guess. Maybe it's the Michael Ingui cult. I love it.
If that's a cult, I consider myself a proud member. Yes,
Nice,
take us to our leader.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, I notice your background's a little different. Your artwork's exploding on your wall. Looks good, brother.
It's another piece. Thanks. Just on trace paper. It'll be gone tomorrow. I like testing it out a little bit.
I love it. Well, listen, everybody, before Michael does his introduction, we know there's going to be a lot of you and a lot of comments in the audience. Please put a Q in front of your questions as your questions come up, a Q in front of your questions. And with the comments, we're just going to be flashing them up periodically as we go through. But if there's a question, we will take those questions on our break. But go ahead. Tell us where you're from. Tell us where you're joining from. Tell us what you had for lunch. We don't care. We'll flash it up on the screen as we go through. But keep it nice. All right. Here we go.
So Michael, all the pressure's on you, my friend. What can you share with us about the wonderful presenter we're having on for episode 52?
I got to tell you, it is. Everybody says, "Oh, it's such a pleasure to know this person or work with this person." But am I allowed to say his name yet, or is that a surprise as well?
No.
Okay, good.
No, we want to keep him. We want to make him sweat a little bit. No, that's not a surprise. But go ahead. I'll just tease you.
So Zack Semke. What can we say? So he really is one of those people who just makes magical things happen. I've been following him when he was with Hammer in Hand, and he's done so much great work with NK Architects. He was with Zola. He's been just a major leader in our climate movement. He's been with Shift Zero. Just so many different things happening. The Climate Reality Project, and he's everywhere. And his energy is he's like a magnet. Everybody wants to kind of be where he is and what he's doing and listening to what he has to say. And he's constantly learning and constantly sharing. Mix that with some creative abilities, and he's that powerhouse because he can communicate it well. Visually on the Passive House Accelerator, where he's the director, and he's kind of created this whole new site where all the icons are new and all the descriptions are clear, and it's just a whole other way about learning how and what is Passive House, and it just shows you just everything he can do as a person. He's probably one of the more impressive people I've met in a long time, and I'm really, really proud to work with him. Yeah, he's a good guy. He's nice as well.
He is nice as well.
Yeah, and he's nice. I love that. I love it.
It's funny that comes last.
Right. Well, Zack is going to come on the show here in just a few minutes. He has a great presentation for us, as always. And I think every time we say Passive House, this upcoming year, I had an idea, Mark. Everybody has to do a shot of something. How about that?
Nice.
Oh yeah. So it could be water, it could be coffee, it could be tea. It's early in the day, except for our friends overseas. Then you ought to have a pint in front of you. There you go. Every time you see Passive House, you either have to take a shot or you have to do an Instagram post of what you see on your screen. How about that, Dave?
I like that. Right. That's it. Let's share the knowledge, because without it and without the sharing and collaboration, we're just going to keep talking amongst ourselves, and we need to talk to everybody out there so people can learn and understand the value of what is happening in our built environment today, which is changing rapidly. Passive House is growing, building systems is growing, and I think the future is looking bright for the younger generation as long as we can get them to join us in this journey.
Mm-hmm. Michael, before you give the grand entrance, I have a short story comment to make. So we all came really familiar with each other over the past 14 to 16 months because of the explosion of this virtual interface, both with Passive House Accelerator, the BS and Beer crew, and everything from Dave Cooper Live. And So a lot of us have developed true friendship and professional experience was really there to support one another through this. You couldn't have planned it better for what we were all experiencing. And there's a gentleman that attended, I would say, nearly all of the Wednesday happy hours by the Global Passive House Happy Hour. His name is Harvey out of Toronto. And later today, Dave and Michael, you'll see a clip of what he's calling Passive House Fridays, where he meets with people and he shoots videos. So all before the show today, when I'm coordinating with Zack and I'm coordinating with Dave and Jennifer, and Michael's just blowing me up on the phone with all of his ideas. I'm sitting there and I'm having the recording with Harvey. And what it shows is when you're there for your community at the right time, you're supporting one another, that we can collectively, as a group, through collaboration, go beyond. That a room full of 6 is better than a voice of 1. And I think it's important to share that. Harvey, I know you're probably commenting like mad in the background, but as you should. So I'm blessed to have met all you folks. I'm blessed to call you all friends. And I'm also blessed with how you live your lives. Like Michael said, Zach's a nice guy. You guys are also, you guys have amazing spouses, amazing kids, and you do all this in your extracurricular activity. So bless your hearts.
Cheers. And to you.
Cheers. All right. What do you think, guys? You think it's time to bring the guest in that we've been keeping in the wind now for 15 whole minutes?
Oh yeah, he's going to come out fighting, right? He's going to come out fighting. Let's roll him out. Michael, take it away.
And here's Zack.
Bam! What is happening?
There you go.
How are you, my friend?
I'm well. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mark. Michael, I'm blushing. That was way too kind.
Oh, no, you could hear it? I can't be too nice.
It's right, exactly. Now, yeah. So you guys, congratulations on 52 weeks. It's so amazing. You're such important contributions to the community, and yeah, big kudos for that. Really awesome. It's an honor to be here on this number 52. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. On behalf of Mark and I, it's an honor having all these guests on and having you guys on more than us being on here, I think. But I love it. You guys are awesome. So, Zack, you're going to wow us again today, and the wow factor that comes with Zack is always incredible because it drives a lot of thought. It drives a lot of conversation. And I think today's going to be the same way. So, wow me, Zack.
Okay. Let's see. We'll see how this goes.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Exactly. So
no pressure. So Zack, before we get started, I know a lot of people know you, but we have a lot of new people following us as well. Why don't you just take 2 seconds and give us a quick intro on who you are, who your background is, and definitely make sure you plug Passive House Accelerator because it's changing the way that we build.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I'm director of Passive House Accelerator, and Passive House Accelerator is an online platform for sharing information about high performance building, about Passive House, about using Passive House as a catalyst to zero carbon building, about using Passive House to build resilience in communities and offer great places, healthy places for people to live. So it's just a place for sharing innovation and thought leadership. And it's Michael founded it, and I had the good fortune of joining the team about 1.5 years ago, and it's been an amazing ride. So. So I need to figure out how to. Okay, there we go. I need to figure out how to share the screen. Share screen. Sorry, everyone. I'll share screen and then fire this up. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So I mentioned I'm director of Passive House Accelerator. I'm also a member of the Climate Reality Leadership Corps. And again, big kudos to you guys for this milestone and for everything that you've contributed to all of us for the last year. I want to talk a little bit about purpose today. And I know that we probably don't share exactly the same purpose in our work, but I think that there's a lot of overlap around the role that buildings and particularly the role that innovation in buildings can play in the world and improving the world. So I'm going to do that by, I'm going to tell a couple stories. So I'm going to tell a story about the origins of chess, a story about 1001 days in the life of a turkey. I also want to talk about vicious cycles and virtuous circles and their role in both the climate crisis as well as climate solution making. And I really want to emphasize the power of learning by doing, or experience curves, in accelerating both the clean energy transition as well as the transition to clean building. So for me, when I think about purpose, this image here comes to mind. And this is the sunrise as seen from the International Space Station. And that thin blue line that you see arcing across the screen is our atmosphere. So when we go outside and we look up in the sky looks really big. So I think we assume that the atmosphere is really large. But in reality, if the Earth were an apple, the atmosphere is as thin as the skin on that apple. Yet we're pumping over 110 million tons of carbon pollution into that very thin, life-sustaining layer every day. And that's beginning to change the world. Okay. So on to chess. I talked, do a quick story. The origins of chess. So hundreds of years ago, chess was invented by a guy named Sisa in India. And the king at the time, King Shiram, loved the game. He loved to play the game. And so he decided he wanted to reward his subject Sisa for this great invention. And so he went up to Sisa and said, hey, I love playing chess. I'm so happy with you. I'd like to give you a gift. What would you like? And so Sisa thought for a moment and said, you know, I'm a simple man. I'd just like some rice. But why don't we use the chessboard to figure out how much rice you can give me? Why don't we start with 1 grain of rice on the first square, 2 on the second, 4 on the next, 8, 16, and so on. How does that sound? And the king laughed at how modest this request was, and he said, "Of course, we'll make it happen." And he went to his minions and said, "Hey, go back into the calculation room and start doing your calculations to figure out how much rice we need to give this guy." So by the end of the first row, of course, we're up to 128 grains of rice on that last square, plus n minus 1. So 128 minus 1 on all the other squares combined. So what? That's 255 grains of rice by the first row. So you can see there's exponential growth going on here. So I want to just pause and ask you to imagine, to give a good guess about where we're headed. What will that 64th square contain at this rate? That top right-hand square. And don't say it in chat, please. Just kind of squirrel that away in your mind, and we'll get back to it in a little bit. Okay, so the calculators got to their work, and they figured out that at the end of the second row, it would be 32,768 grains of rice. End of the third row, 8 million. And by the end of the fourth row, 2 billion grains of rice on that square, plus roughly 2 billion grains of rice on the rest of the board. So even just with that first half of the chessboard, they're already at 4 billion grains of rice. And so the calculators started getting nervous because they saw where this was headed, and they were worried about the reaction of their king. But they knew they had a job to do, so they kept on moving. They got up to 549 billion by the next row, 140 trillion the next one, 36 quadrillion, and finally 9 quintillion grains of rice on the 64th square, plus roughly 9 quintillion grains of rice on the rest of the board, resulting in over 18 quintillion grains of rice owed to Sisa. That's a lot of rice. It's 1,000 times the global rice production in 2010. If you were to stack up all of this rice into one big mound, it would be as tall as Mount Everest. So there are a couple of versions of the ending of this story. One is that King Shiram was so pleased and impressed by Sisa that he promoted him to become his right-hand man. The other version is that he was so disgusted with his insolence that he had him executed. But in either case, there are 2 really important morals to this story. One is the incredible power of exponential growth and exponential change. And the other is how non-intuitive it is, how difficult it is for us to grok it. So I imagine that a lot of you came up with a really big number for that 64th square. But if this was the first time you heard the story, I bet that it wasn't 9 quintillion. So this is really non-intuitive stuff, which brings me to one of my favorite books, The Black Swan. And this was a book written by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And in it, Taleb posits that all of phenomena, things like growth rates and other things in nature, human systems, fall into one of two provinces. We've got the province of Mediocristan and the province of Extremistan. And neither of these provinces are better or worse than the other. They're just different, and they are governed by very different laws. So in most of our daily experience, we're familiar with Mediocristan. So an example of Mediocristan is adult height, human height. So human height is characterized by gradual, predictable growth. It's egalitarian. There are no big winners or big losers. You don't see a 4-foot tall person next to an 800-foot tall person. We all get a fairly similar slice of the human height pie. It's easy to understand human height with a very small sample size. So aliens could swoop down to Earth and sample 5 humans, 5 adults, and have a really good idea about what human height is all about for the rest of the 7 billion of us on the planet. So Mediocristan is a realm of no big surprises. It's intuitive. It's about common sense. Mediocristan is mild. Extremistan, on the other hand, is wild. So 2 potentially equally talented musicians, Bono on the left and this busker, this street musician on the right, can make ridiculously divergent amounts of money for their work. So Bono, for example, pre-COVID was making about $108 million a year as the frontman of U2. And this busker would have been lucky if he was making $40,000 a year. So I made a little chart for everybody. There's a bunch of buskers on the bottom. They don't even register. I added a Seattle. I'm from Seattle. I added a Seattle symphony violinist who I figured probably makes about $120,000 a year. Again, doesn't even register. So this is a realm of big winners and big losers. It's a winner take all. It's giants among a sea of dwarves. It wasn't always this way though for musicians. Back in the day before recording technology and before the gramophone, the musicians existed in the realm of Mediocristan. So even the world's most famous opera singer needed to show up on stage every night to earn her keep. She was bounded, she was limited by space and time in that regard. But when the recording technology came along and the gramophone came along, she was liberated and could stand in front of a microphone for 5 minutes and sing an aria, and that aria could then be cut onto a record and reproduced thousands, even millions of times and distributed around the world. And so suddenly she transcended time and space and was able to leverage that 5 minutes for exponential return. And she entered the realm of Mediocristan. So another important thing to say about, a couple of important things to say about of Extremistan, is one, that it's really hard to understand Extremistan with a small sample size. If you accidentally missed Bono and when you swooped down as an alien and sampled musicians, you'd miss a fundamental truth about music today. It's also highly unpredictable. Nobody would have predicted that when Bono was, say, 12 years old, that he would be making $108 million in late middle age fronting a band like U2. So in that respect, he's a bit of a black swan, which we'll get to later. So we've entered Extremistan in climate today. This graph shows that over the last 800,000 years, we've never gone above 300 parts per million of CO2. So it was kind of in Mediocristan for a while. Never, that is, until just a couple of decades or few decades, when we blew past 300 parts per million, and then 350 parts per million, and then 400 parts per million, and then last month hit 420 parts per million. So this spike in CO2 is another example of a black swan and of Extremistan. So Extremistan is about positive feedback loops, and vicious cycles are an example of positive feedback loops that have very negative consequences. And unfortunately, that's part of the climate crisis, right? So albedo, it refers to how reflective the Earth is. And as ice melts, albedo reduces, the Earth becomes less reflective, and more of the sun's rays then are absorbed as heat energy rather than being reflected off into space as light. The Earth warms more, ice melts, and the cycle starts to feed off itself. Methane and permafrost. As permafrost melts, methane gets released that traps more heat. The Earth warms more permafrost melts, and that can feed off itself. Melting polar ice. As meltwater pools at the poles, that sets off a dynamic that breaks up ice sheets more quickly, which means that more ice melts and more meltwater pools at the poles, and that starts to take off. And all this is happening mainly because we're burning a lot of fossil fuels and releasing a bunch of CO2 into the atmosphere. It's a really stark increases. It actually went down significantly last year. As you can see, there's a downward blip there, but it will go back up in 2021. Everyone is expecting and seeing. And of course, that means that we're having lots of warming. Everyone knows this. And 19 of the 20 hottest years on record have occurred since the year 2002. The hottest of all have been the last 7 years. So we are seeing we're seeing the trend continue here of warming. And 93% of the extra heat is trapped by that goes into the ocean. So that means that temperatures are rising in the ocean as well. So I mentioned feedback loops. There are a number of vicious cycles that scientists are concerned about, and that include some potential tipping points. So the Amazon rainforest potentially becoming savanna is a concern. Arctic sea ice melting, Atlantic circulation slowing. It has been slowing down, and which is a very big danger. Boreal forests burning, coral reefs dying, Greenland ice sheet melting, permafrost thawing, more Antarctic ice melting. So we have some potential big problems ahead if we don't turn things around. And we just heard 2 months ago from the study that says that if we exceed 1.5 degrees with warming, that wet bulb temperatures, so the combination of heat and humidity, will make some portions of the tropics too hot to survive, which obviously for lots of justice reasons and just humanity reasons we don't want to see, as well as security reasons. So to stop this, we need, and to keep warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to follow something that's been coined the carbon law, which is that emissions need to reduce by 50% between 2020 and 2030, another 50% between 2030 and 2040, another 50% from 2040 and 2050, and so on. That's if we want to have a good chance of keeping warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But we know that all these companies, these fossil fuel companies, oil companies, coal companies, have trillions of dollars of reserves and resources on their books, right, that are currently in the ground. So are we fooling ourselves that we can turn things around? What's to stop these companies from digging it all up and burning it all? I'm in Seattle, as I mentioned, and this is a dot where I am at this moment in the basement. And if we were to actually burn it all, the science tells us that this is what would happen with 215 feet of sea level rise. This would take a long time. I wouldn't be around anymore, but my house would be under at least 6 or 10 feet of water. Great kayaking, I think, that you can see there's a great archipelago of Seattle hills here represented. So will we just burn it all? I don't think so. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit after the break.
What do you think about that, Mark? What do you think about that? I mean, he even built in his own break for us this time. This is how skilled of a presenter Zack is. And Zack, I have to tell you, the way you tell stories so people can relate to the issues that are at hand is so powerful. And I have to tell you, for a simple-minded guy that does not have the data thinking that you guys have when it comes to analytics, it really puts it in perspective. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you for that.
That kicked ass. Thank you. That was great.
Thanks.
That's a new hashtag, data thinking. I would align it with one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Wayne Dyer, and I always butcher it, so it's my version of his quote. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at begin to change.
Mhm.
And you did that in your words and in your graphics countless times. The rice story was different than the version I heard before, but it's lunch hour for me, so I kept thinking of tortillas, refried beans, and green salsa.
Mhm.
But then to hear the numbers laid out, I guess when anyone out there is ready for a review with their superior, have the chess conversation from Zack in your head about the grains of rice.
Mhm.
You expounded it so many territories. Your take, Mike?
That was great. I loved it. I could listen to you all day, Zach.
Michael.
I don't get bored. And I didn't hear any of those stories, so that was great.
Awesome.
It was all new
Awesome.
territory.
Well, I've got another story queued up. So when we're ready.
Well, listen, I love it. Why don't we take a moment and say hello to a few people that are out there? Let's get everybody warmed up. Let us know where you're joining us from today. Let us know where you are, what location, and what you're having for lunch. Mark's hungry. Let's make him hungrier. What the heck?
Yeah, thanks for that, Dave.
Anything I can do to help you, buddy? All right, we got Shannon Pendleton joining us. It's so Friday.
Hey, Shannon.
Who isn't happy that it's Friday today? I'm super happy. And we have the Greg Ugaldi coming in from Twitch, another great BS Friday topic with Mark and Dave. And listen, if you don't know who Greg Ugaldi is, you need to know Greg. This is the guy that gets to update the president a couple times a year and takes the time to listen to us BS. How cool is that?
It's great, Craig. Next time you're up in Seattle, have a glass of tea with Zack, and when you're over in Brooklyn, Michael's got a team of people that would love to chat with you. You're always welcome.
That's it. And look, he's on Twitch. We have more followers and more comments from Twitch today too, which I'm super happy about. The Buzz Holowitzer's in. Happy Friday, y'all. And for those of you joining us and you don't understand what PH means in front of these, and where it should be F's and everything else, it stands for passive house. We love talking amongst ourselves in our little groups, but so join us. So every time you see an F, you gotta replace it with PH on this show. Love it, love it, love it. All right, across the pond, Adam White. Happy Friday, all. You know, I got a challenge for you, Adam. I would love to see one of your goats sprayed in passive purple.
So I was on the phone with Adam.
Guys in the back row say that's inhumane. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Don't do that, right?
Dave, don't challenge him. He might do it. I was on the phone with Adam today, and I hear all this calamity and stuff going on, and then the phone gets picked up, and I said, Adam, what happened? He goes, the bloody goat just came in the door and stole my paperwork. I gotta go chase him.
I love that.
For those of you that don't know, Adam literally opens his back door and the goats walk in the house. They're that close. It's not when Adam says the goats ate his homework, it's probably true.
Yeah.
I love it.
Van Goat. Who else is joining us, Dave?
Well, let's go. Buzz had a comment, and since we are at Alpin Windows here, sold Alpin, great window. Listen, I see how he did the window. Have to pinch off the expansion tubes on them when shipped to Michigan. So there you go. Somebody that used your windows. Love it, love it, love it. All right, Craig, I don't know how to say the last name. Marerhofer. Okay, sorry about that, Craig. I owe you a beer. That's Craig.
That's your Craig.
Well, just come on in here. You didn't have to put it up there. You're sitting across the hall over there. Say your own name. No, I'm just kidding you.
He's busting your chops, Dave. He's busting your chops. I love it.
Yeah, I know. Well, we just met a few seconds before the show anyhow, so he can't hold that against me. So we love it, Craig. Thank you for hosting us here today. Really appreciate everything. All right, so it was Sean that was on Twitch. Congrats on 52 episodes. I'm a big fan of BS Friday. He missed the PH there. Looking forward to this on that. Features Zack. Hey, Zack, you got some fans out there. Wow. Shannon Pendleton says good. Congratulations as well. George Ryman says good morning from Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, here's somebody we haven't seen in a while, Mark. Dr. Brett Musson.
Oh.
What is happening, Dr.
The
Musson?
good doctor, right?
He is the good doctor. Did I just
Did I
hear that
just
it's your
hear that it's your birthday? Logged in late. Is it someone's birthday?
It's not my birthday. August 20th. Write it down, everybody. Let's celebrate.
It's your
Have a
first
big
birthday.
Zoom party.
It's your first birthday.
It's our first birthday. Right. Hey, it is our first birthday.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's an anniversary. I don't know if
Yeah.
Well, it's like a birthday.
Tell what you want, Dr. Munson.
Hey, listen, don't tell Mark. Don't tell him it's his first birthday, because I do know Mark. We'll end up on naked on the show, just as if we were born. We know how this. Stop. Let's move on. Let's move on. All right. Here we go. Scott Farman's joining us today. Happy Friday, Zachary. Semke, loved the letter you wrote to the Biden administration about reducing carbon emissions.
Thanks,
As
Scott.
did I. Yeah.
Did you get a response? That's the question.
I'm still waiting to hear from Joe. I haven't heard from Joe. No.
You haven't heard from Joe?
Mhm.
All right.
Scott, if you want to put that letter in the chat, it's up to all of our listeners to re-forward that letter to the White House and let them give it a read.
Yeah, for sure. We got George Ryman joining us today, everybody, as well, living in Phoenix. I understand too hot to live.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, here we go. We got a couple more comments and we're getting back to it, Zach. Shannon Pendleton. Go ahead, Mark. Say that. I'm hogging all the comments today.
We need force multipliers to get exponential growth going in the right direction. So the right direction is the clear point there, right? If I were to echo your words, I would say we need force multipliers to get exponential growth going in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we have Susan Rowley on the show as well. Hey, Susan. Go ahead, Mark.
Susan had the best graph, by the way, of the first year, and she's added and multiplied to it. So, Susan, thanks for being here. Intermission, yes. Go get the popcorn, and I don't know. It's almost 2:00 in Toronto. Maybe you can have a glass of sangria, Susan.
That's right. I love it. Moving down the road, let's get one more out here. We got a couple more, and then we're getting back. Greg Ugaldi, and I thought that Rice guy getting his head chopped off was tough news. However, Zach highlighted some important issues. Oh, leave it to Greg. Here you go, all the way to Portugal today, Mark. Hello from sunny Portugal. I love the hat, man. I want one of those hats.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
I love it. I can't speak Portuguese, but I'm still young. I'll get there.
I was in Portugal. They have the most beautiful cobblestone roads, and they still put them in the ground today. It's an amazing process watching them. They're not the big ones like we have. They're the real thin, round ones.
I believe the term for that, Dave, is empedrada. I believe it's called empedrada.
Yeah.
So the word stone is piedra, and then to multiply the stones everywhere is empedrada.
Look at you. All right, here we go. Here you go, Mark. Take this one. I'm moving on because I can't compete with your knowledge.
So random thoughts by Mark Willey. Rob Hoskin, right? Wonderful presenter, wonderful person, incredible expert. He says back to basics, exclamation mark, right? Always nice to relate our super technical work to the reasons why we are doing it. Plus, hello from Pittsburgh. Hello, Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my hometown. My whole family's there. Love that place. All right, Zach. Everybody has their popcorn. Everybody refresh their drinks. So we're gonna put the show back at you here. So let's get into round 2 of the Zack presentation. Here we go.
All right, coming at you. Okay, so will we just burn it all? That's where we left off, and I don't think so. And I want to start my reasoning with this story. So 1001 days in the life of a turkey. So day 1, the turkey's born and is given a nice big pen to free range around and some clean water and some good food. He's got a good life, with day in and day out. He's getting a little plumper, a little stronger, a little larger, a little happier. I mean, there are ups and downs, in the turkey's life, but he pretty much knows what to expect moving forward. What could go wrong? He's living the good life in Mediocristan. The problem for the turkey, though, is that Thanksgiving belongs in Extremistan. And so on day 1001, that axe comes down, the feathers are plucked, and the turkey is served for Thanksgiving dinner. And it's that event, the event that that turkey could not see or would not see, that changed everything for the turkey's life. Of course, it ended his life. That is the Black Swan event. And Nicholas Taleb argues that most of or many of the turning points in human history can be described using this graph. So the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, 9/11, the election of the first Black president, the election of Donald Trump. And so a Black Swan event can be either a positive or a negative event, but what it does is it takes an established system that people figure they totally understand, the experts do not expect to change, and it completely disrupts it. This unpredictable event that changes everything. So shortly after I finished this book, I encountered this image from a report by AllianceBernstein. And AllianceBernstein is an asset management company that manages $697 billion of assets now. It's possible that your retirement funds are managed by AllianceBernstein. And in this report in 2015, they shared this graph and they labeled it "Welcome to the Terror Dome," because they realized and they knew that something big was afoot here. So on the y-axis, we see price of energy in dollars. And on the x-axis, we see time measured in years. And those wavering lines on the bottom, those wavering lines of color, are the status quo. They're the cost of energy provided by fossil fuels. And then suddenly out of nowhere, falling from the sky, literally, comes solar energy. And it crashes down, and by 2014 begins to compete with fossil fuel energy on price without subsidy. And this is in emerging Asian markets, this report. But before 2007, solar energy was too expensive to even register on this graph at all. But in 2007, it showed up as a blip and then crashed down and started to compete. And what AllianceBernstein said in this report is they expect this trend, this downward trend for solar energy, to continue, and that it certainly has since 2015, because solar energy is a technology, not a fuel. And unlike fuels, where they can behave more like commodities with prices going up and down, in technology, innovation drives technology costs down. So many of you probably know about Moore's law, where every couple of years we double the number of transistors that can fit on a chip, and that's described is the reason behind the exponential growth in computing power and the really rapid decline in the cost of that computing power. In solar energy, as well as wind energy and batteries and cars, and even potentially the cost delta between passive house and conventional construction, we have something called Swanson's law. It's also known as Wright's law, experience curve, learning curve law. It's simply learning by doing. And in solar energy in the last 10, 12 years, what is observed is that every time we double the number of solar panels that are deployed around the world, that the price of those solar panels declines by 42.7%. So this is what that has done for the cost of solar energy over time. So in 1976, a watt of solar energy was $79.40. Today, it's 20 cents a watt. Phenomenal cost decline happening. So this just came from Carbon Tracker Initiative, showing that back in 2015, when that AllianceBernstein report was happening, they were just seeing the very beginning of this, but basically nowhere in the world was solar energy cheaper than fossil fuels without subsidy yet. By 2020, though, in 60% of the world, solar energy is cheaper than fossil fuels. And by 2025, that number will be 90%. And by 2030, it will be true everywhere. So that's the first tipping point. There's another one coming when solar energy is cheaper than running existing fossil fuel energy plants. So there are some big changes coming thanks to this learning curve and the learning by doing. Now, learning by doing definitely also applies to us in the built environment, in buildings. I don't know how many times I've heard of project teams doing their first passive house, learning a bunch of tough lessons maybe when they did their first because it's new, and then applying those lessons to the second project and having a much smaller expense related to that second project. The first example of this that I heard about comes from this pioneering project that happened about 10 years ago called Orchards at Orenco outside of Portland, Oregon. It's built by Walsh Construction. And they did 2 buildings. Their first building, they were on the bleeding edge of passive house at this point. So it's actually a higher premium than I'm used to seeing. Now we see lower ones, but they were leading the charge, 11% premium for their first passive house project, multifamily building. The second one, basically the same size building, was only 5% a construction cost premium. So the learning between those 2 projects resulted in more than 50% reduction in the extra cost for a passive house. And we can see even more compelling data around this from the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, and we can see lots of different projects. So what you're seeing here is a scatter plot of 268 proposed projects to the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, or PHFA. So PHFA is in charge of awarding low-income housing tax credits to affordable housing developers. And these are really important mechanisms for affordable housing developers to make their projects work. And it's a very competitive process. A bunch of different developers apply to PHFA for these LIHTCs. And between 2015 and 2018, PHFA gave a competitive advantage to teams who tried passive house. So a bunch of them did. So there's the 268 buildings. You can see cost on the y-axis and size on the x-axis, and 74 passive house buildings in blue. They're basically no cost differential, right? The average conventional proposed building was $175 per square foot, and the average passive house was $173. The thing that is particularly interesting to me, though, and I think provides evidence that we're seeing learning by doing happening in the built environment as well, is that the first year there was a 5.8% premium for the passive house proposals. Year 2, a 1.6% premium, and by year 3, actually a 3.3% savings. So back to solar energy, the cost decline that was happening thanks to learning curve law has also been driving exponential growth in installations around the world. And remember, so go back to the chess story, we know that exponential growth can make big changes. And we're seeing exponential growth in passive house as well. This is from FIAS, showing a doubling of square footage of FIAS projects year on year. And I need to reach out to Passive House Institute to get their data. I suspect it's very similar. So one of the really interesting things about all this, though, is that the experts have not been able to wrap their head around this. So the world's leading experts around energy and energy prognostications is the International Energy Agency, the IEA. And what we're looking at here is the exponential curve there is actual historic deployment of solar energy. And those blue lines are predictions by the International Energy Agency of what solar will do year after year. And you can see that every year they say, oh, we were wrong last year, so we'll move up our line, but every year that line is flat. So what we're seeing is that because solar is a technology, it belongs in Extremistan, but solar energy is a technology, but energy has been a fuel for so long that there's still this mediocrity and thinking happening that we can only see gradual growth. This is another example of the same data. It's actually updated, though, up to 2019. So the red line is actual, and the horizontal lines are the predictions from International Energy Agency. So say in 2015, the actual deployment was 50 gigawatts, and IEA said, okay, it's 50, but it's going to be 50 next year, and the year after that, it's just going to be 50 forever. So then the next year, actually, the real deployment was 75 gigawatts. And IEA said, okay, fine, it's 75 this year, but it's just going to be 75 for the rest of the time. And then the same thing happened the next year. It was 100 gigawatts the next year, and IEA did it again and again. So there's this trend here of just not being able to accept the exponential quality of what's happening in solar energy. And the same is true for the forecast. So solar costs are decades ahead of the forecasts. The forecasts are shown here in the dotted lines. So IEA 2010 is the black one, IEA 2014 forecast is the gray. And then there are a couple from Ramez Nam, who is a leading thinker and writer about clean energy. And he's on the optimistic side of forecasts. His are blue and green. But you can see that even Ramez Nam doesn't hit 5 cents a kilowatt hour, that bottom line, until almost 2030 for his forecast 5 years ago, and almost 2035 for his forecast 2011. And IEA doesn't hit 5 cents a kilowatt hour until way past 2050. And with their 2010 forecast, who knows, maybe 2100. But the reality is that solar energy hit 5 cents a kilowatt hour last year and even before. So there's a huge disconnect happening between what's going on the ground with renewable energy and what the forecasts have been saying. So this comes from AllianceBernstein, that asset management company I mentioned. And their quote is, "The relentlessness and speed of change is matched only by the strength of the human instinct to ignore that change and deny the breadth of its implications." So I don't mean to rag on IEA. It's really not their fault. The definition of a black swan event is the experts don't see it coming. That said, people who have been following technology are not surprised by these curves and this exponential change happening in solar energy, because they know that technology uptake follows an S curve, and it has this exponential period that then goes to levels off to 100% market share. And we see this over and over with all sorts of technologies, as you can see in this graph. One thing to note is that how steep that S curve is it's getting steeper and steeper as we enter the technological age here and progress in it. So if we want to keep fossil fuels in the ground, that is, not burn fossil fuels so that we don't release CO2 in the atmosphere, then if that is the pathway to climate security, then climate security therefore must equal fossil fuel demand destruction. And this is a concept that comes straight from Carbon Tracker Initiative, the think tank in the UK. And they've done they did the kind of the pioneering thinking around the concept of stranded assets. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to unpack it for you. But what's exciting to me about this is that it draws a direct line between the work that we're doing in energy efficiency in buildings and embodied carbon in buildings and renewable energy in buildings. It draws a direct line from that and the goal of keeping fossil fuels in the ground rather than burning them. So what we see on the y-axis is the price of oil per barrel. And on the x-axis, we're looking at the volume of oil represented in resources. This is all oil in the ground, resources that are identified by oil companies. And it's divided into quartiles. So on the left, we're looking at oil resources that are easy and therefore cheap to extract. And on the right, we're looking at oil resources that are difficult to extract and therefore expensive to extract. And that blue line represents the break-even price point. So for example, right now, the cost of a barrel of oil is about $70 a barrel. It's actually higher than it's been for a while. COVID was a huge demand destroyer last year, and so oil prices plummeted. But they're back to $70 a barrel now as we're coming out of COVID. And you can see that all the orange resources there are uneconomic to exploit. So they would be, the oil companies are losing money if they drill those resources at that price. Now, if we go down to $50 a barrel, which we were at just a little bit ago, you can
Zack,
see, yeah.
Could you highlight some of these orange ones, because it's a little hard for the audience to see? Just give a couple call outs.
Yeah, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, so this area here is uneconomic at $70 a barrel, right here. Now can you see my little red dot?
Yes,
I don't know.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
red dot is at $50 a barrel. So at that price, 2/3 of the resources here shown are uneconomic. If that price persisted, oil companies would be losing money drilling those resources.
So,
So
can you call out what a couple of those are? Because not everyone can quite see the font.
yeah, sure. The Mexico gas projects is one. Gas. There's a Saudi gas project. The tar sands are up on the top. There's Pacific Northwest LNG. The details of which specific resource are not that important. So I apologize for them being so small on your screen. The point is that that 2/3 at $50 a barrel, a lot of oil is uneconomic to exploit, right? And so, as we do energy efficiency in buildings, as we do more clean energy, as we adopt electric vehicles, we're destroying demand for fossil fuels, and all things equal, can be moving this dot down this cost curve, and potentially stranding assets in the ground because it just doesn't make money. It doesn't make economic sense for these companies to be extracting it at that price. And so as we continue to do those things, we can be stranding more and more assets. Now, during COVID, the number was down to 20, it even dipped for one day below 0, right? That there was a long period there where almost no oil was economic to extract, and these companies were writing off huge amounts off their books. Now, that's tough for those companies, and in order for us to limit global warming, we need to keep fossil fuels in the ground. So there is this direct connection between what we're doing and that aim, if you share it with me. So then if we price carbon like we just did in Washington State, then that whole oil price curve goes up, and we strand more fossil fuels in the ground. So I mentioned vicious cycles before, and Shannon mentioned the importance of figuring out how to move progress forward. I can't remember the exact. It was well said. I'm not paraphrasing well. We have virtuous circles in the solution making sphere too. That can accelerate this trend of fossil fuel demand destruction. So one, of course, that I've been talking about is wind and solar and the Swanson's law. As costs decrease, we're able to deploy more wind and solar. That drives costs down with Swanson's law, which means more is deployed, and that can feed off itself. As renewables gain more market share, they drag energy price down, and low prices strand fossil fuels in the ground, meaning renewables gain more market share, and that can start to feed off itself as well and accelerate. As the grid mix shift, we get more power from renewables and the negawatts from energy efficiency. Then the cost of conventional power goes up as conventional power plants are idled more of the year, and that means more power from renewables and negawatts on the grid in the grid mix, and that can take it off on its own. Electric vehicles. Now I know we need to be thinking about the form of our cities and thinking about transit and walking and biking, but electric vehicles will absolutely be a key piece of the clean energy transition. And as there's increased demand for these vehicles, that accelerates R&D, which means better performance and cheaper vehicles. Again, these are technologies which then starts to feed off itself as well. And there's a relationship between the batteries on wheels that EVs represent. They can provide storage to the grid or power to home, which increases the value of renewables, which are inherently intermittent, and deals with that intermittency on a daily basis at least. And those more renewables are deployed as transport shifts to electricity, and that can feed off itself. And then, of course, my favorite, energy efficiency, because I love Passive House. As more efficiency is deployed, the market and the supply chain respond, costs decrease for deploying this efficiency, and that feeds off itself as well. So I'm going to go into how does Passive House fit in, but I'm going to take a break now.
Hey, yeah. Oh, perfect. So Michael had to jump. I just wanted to make sure that we thanked him for being on the show real quick. And if we're at the break time, that was perfect timing. Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, not at all.
Michael, I really want to make sure that we thank you for all the times that you've been coming on the show, and I thank you for sticking with us here today. You are a mover and groover and a shaker here for us. So, and the intro to Zack was awesome. So thanks so much for spending your time with us.
Thank you, Michael.
Cool. Enjoy.
I appreciate you. We'll
Bye,
see
guys.
Do
you.
you have any final words, Michael?
I gotta tell you, I am loving the presentation, and I'm gonna look forward to watching the next bit. This is honestly, Zach, this is fantastic.
Thanks.
It's great, and it's so clear. It's so obvious. So thank you. Honestly, this is great.
I actually thought that you wrote this presentation, didn't you, Michael?
Not on my best day. As I said when I did the intro to Zach, he has this ability of just describing it clearly.
Yeah.
And you do, man. This is good. Kudos.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's
you're
good
a rock
stuff.
star.
Yeah.
All right, Michael. Thank you. Tell your family and your son, everybody, we said hello.
I shall. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
So
All
that
right,
was an
Zach,
inside
back to you.
joke that everyone kind of gets. We love to give one another credit for the work we do. And Zach, the timing was perfect. Just when Michael was getting ready to segue into his afternoon meeting, your black swan appears. I took screenshots of so much of the presentation because I know that I need to watch it again.
There's a lot there.
There was a lot there. So we all have a different way of memorizing and bringing ourselves up to a level of clear thought. And for me, like the words and actions of Jimmy Carter were being echoed in your presentation. He was an outlier doing things in the White House and never got a credit. In fact, he was discredited for his work. And, I just can't, I shudder to think of the place our communities would be at today if we had stopped being a force against and being a collaborative force for. It's
There definitely there's some missed
aspiration is
opportunities. Yeah.
there. Missed opportunities.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
Hey, listen, Zach, I mean, everything you just put out there, and I agree with Michael and everybody else. I don't know. Jennifer said it best. Let me just put this up here real quick because I think she had the best comment here. She said, Zachary Semke feels like this story could be translated really well to a children's book. The world could use another Passive House book for kids.
Oh, that's a great idea. That'd be
Right?
fun.
You should take it and just make those short stories. You have a gift, my friend. You do have a gift.
Thank you.
It's really true. The charts and whatnot are very similar to some of the things you saw in the Doug Farr book, but that target there, Jennifer, the pictures and the illuminating sense of thinking to our youth is exactly what is needed. And well, Zach, you have a very creative family, so maybe some of the artwork could be done by
Right, Mika. Right, Mika could do some
I looks
artwork.
like Michael's pretty good at it too.
Yeah,
Nice.
I love that. What kind of comments, Jennifer? That was perfect. What kind of comments did you see throughout the second presentation, Dave?
Yeah, let's put some things up here. This one we're just going to throw up. Julian Boren is a god when it comes to offsite construction. I called you a god. Yes, I did, Julian. I think I think you got it all pulled together and really know all your stuff. So I appreciate you tuning in. Very true. I didn't know that one was up there yet. The unusual degree of clarity, solar equals 0.05 kilowatt hours, and batteries will soon be parked next to every house at night. All you need to know. So, Julian, thank you for joining us. I'm telling you, this is good to have you starting to tune into what Zack has to say in Passive House Accelerator, because these conversations happen every day with those guys.
Yeah, that was a great comment. When we run into situations, once our buildings require less energy to operate, they truly will be powered off of our car during that interim. There's a talking technology that needs to happen for that, but that's just a chip switch. So it's brilliant, and what it causes is resiliency versus panic, and that sort of justice doesn't have boundaries. It's not for a specific neighborhood or a specific person. It's for all communities, right? We haven't mastered the housing game yet. There's still homelessness. We haven't mastered the energy game yet. We haven't mastered the hunger game. But there's a megaphone out there, and bless your heart for being one of those people.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Mark, here's one you can read from Rob Hoskin.
Okay, Rob says, what do you think about the idea of energy internet with automated energy savers located in many homes and buildings equipped with PV systems and batteries?
Yeah,
Zack, you want to take that?
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really powerful concept and speaks to the value of distributed energy resources, right? The DERs, which I'm going to touch on a little bit when I wrap things up. But Rob, there's a really interesting study I think that would be right up your alley from Christopher Clack. It gets really geeky, but talking about the role that that rooftop solar, rooftop solar is so much more expensive than utility solar, right? And so I think that there's an assumption that a lot of us make that, well, it'd be better to spend money on the utility, the grid scale solar rather than the rooftop. But this study is showing how powerful the distributed energy resources can be in saving money on the distribution and also dealing with fluctuations in demand and the intermittency of solar energy and wind. So it makes the argument that actually including some rooftop solar energy and distributed energy, which is what you're describing, I think, partly with the internet idea, will help achieve the greater clean energy transition with really significant money savings, and actually unlock even more economic, even more grid scale solar. So absolutely, I think that thinking of not just being centralized in our energy system, but thinking about how we're all interconnected with batteries and solar and energy efficiency, which is what I'll get to.
Yeah, the point of origin is there, right? It's been used in Europe forever. And when we have these horrific storms, the infrastructure needed to get people up and running versus if you have your point source is your property or your neighbor's property plug-in. How wonderful is that? And then the buildings requiring less energy means there's less panels needed. And then when we switch to the CAD 6 delivering the DC power to our devices versus the thick copper strands and the thick conduits holding the copper strands encased in plastic. I mean, good night.
Yeah.
Using less energy is really what we all wanted in the first place. We just never had the possibility of having it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, listen, everybody. I know there's a couple more comments out there. We still have some more presentation to go through. We're at an hour and 11 minutes. So, Zack, let's get back to the presentation and see if we can work our way through this and wrap her up after the end of the slides here.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the exciting conclusion to part 3. Here we go. Sorry, there's this funny pause as I get everything ready. All right, can you see the swan?
Yeah, we got the black swan.
Perfect.
All right,
Take it
awesome.
away.
Okay, so time to talk about Passive House. So everybody drink. So I've been talking a lot about the climate impacts and climate benefits of clean buildings, but it would be remiss if I didn't talk about the benefits to occupants around Passive House, and I also get to show off some of our new icons here. So for occupants, the most important thing about Passive House is indoor air quality and health and comfort, 24/7, quiet, serene environments as well. And we don't have dust blowing through envelopes, right? Dust-free environments. We're not having bugs come through cracks in the walls. That's an issue, especially like in older housing stock in New York. So retrofits eliminate that. We don't have unwanted moisture or odors because we're exchanging the air all the time. These are durable structures. They have predictable performance, so we're not wondering about what the outcome will be when we do a passive house project. They're affordable. They can help eliminate fuel poverty in housing. Of course, they have all sorts of planetary benefits. They're also complementary, so that they can work well with other forms of sustainable building certification like LEED or Living Building Challenge, and there's a direct connection, of course, with electrification and renewable energy and embodied carbon. And finally, that last icon is about resilience. So when the Texas freeze, we have some stories about how resilient passive houses were during the freeze. They can weather storms. They can deal with long power outages with safe temperatures inside, and they can also create havens of clean air during big air pollution events like we've been experiencing on the West Coast with wildfires. So lots of benefits. And these are delivered with design principles. I'm just going to fly through these partly to share these graphics. And all these graphics are available for you to download and use in Creative Commons from PassiveHouseAccelerator.com. So continuous insulation, no thermal bridging, airtight construction, high performance windows and doors, fresh air ventilation with heat recovery. Those are the classic 5. And then we also have shading when we don't need solar gain, orientation and form, capturing daylighting and solar gain when we want it, managing moisture, both bulk water and vapor, and then smart and efficient domestic hot water generation and distribution. So all those come together to create Passive House. And Passive House also has this really important relationship with climate action in buildings. So when you combine deep energy efficiency with low embodied carbon, with electrifying everything and powering it all with clean energy, we can transform buildings from being part of the climate problem, they're currently 40% of emissions, to part of the climate solution. Now, when it comes to climate math, the climate crisis is a wicked complex problem. But the math is straightforward. We know we need to get carbon emissions over there on the right. We need to bring those down to 0, right? Carbon emissions are a product of 4 factors. So population times GDP per capita times the energy intensity of our economies times the carbon intensity of that energy. We know that in the next couple of decades, we're going to see population grow by a couple billion people before it levels off and starts to decline by the end of the century. So that circle is going to get bigger. We hope that as hundreds of millions of people rise out of poverty around the world, that GDP per capita will increase. So that circle is getting bigger, which means there's a lot of pressure on energy intensity and carbon intensity to get towards 0. And remember that carbon law says that we need to be cutting emissions by 50% every 10 years to hit 1.5 degrees warming. That means we don't have time to waste, and we don't have time to argue whether energy efficiency is more important than embodied carbon is more important than renewable energy. We need to be making our economies very energy efficient, and we need to be making our energy very low carbon intensity. So we don't have the luxury of saying, I care about embodied carbon and not energy efficiency, or vice versa. So I want to highlight the importance of energy efficiency in the transition to clean buildings really quickly with 3 points. The first point is that overall energy is reduced. So Bella Bella, BC, this is a case study from Monty Paulson at RDH Building Science. It was the 6-unit project was burned out, as you can see on the top, and replaced by a 6-unit passive house project. Same square footage, half as much energy use. So that's for a multifamily building, that's a big deal. And then 90% less carbon intensity, because of both the energy use reduction and the switch to electric heat. So the next point I want to make about energy efficiency is that it makes the timing of demand friendly to the grid. So one of the tricky things about the transition to 100% clean energy is that we have intermittent solar and wind. And so when we're thinking about the ways that our buildings interact with that clean grid, we want to make sure that we're not making the problem worse, but we're actually helping to solve that problem of intermittency. So this is a comparison of 2 zero net energy buildings. This is a thought experiment created by Peter Turnbull at PG&E. And you can see the yellow bell curve is the generation profile from the solar PV on this hypothetical building. And then the gray blob is the energy load from that building. Building 2 decides to not only just add solar PV to a conventional building, but also implement energy efficiency and demand response. And so the energy efficiency reduces overall energy demand, and the demand response helps you scoop out some of that demand and place it in the middle of the day under that bell curve of the solar panels generation. The bell curve also can get smaller because the array doesn't have to be as big for an efficient net zero energy building. And so we're being much more successful at concentrating the load under the bell curve. And this is what that means in terms of the relationship to the grid. So building 1 is dumping a ton of solar energy onto the grid in the middle of the day. This clean energy grid already has tons of solar energy happening during that time from its utility solar. So it doesn't really want energy at that moment. But then at the end of the day, in the evening when the sun goes down, this building is consuming a ton of energy from the grid, just as that grid no longer has its utility scale solar operating. So it's making the problem worse. Whereas with the building 2, all of that is flattened significantly, and the rest can be dealt with battery storage on site on a daily basis. So it becomes a good grid citizen. Energy efficiency is key to the clean energy transition. That's true also on a seasonal basis. So this is Michael Liebreich, formerly from the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, a great thinker in clean energy. And he points out that in the UK, heating load is routinely 6 times greater than electricity supply. So much of that heating load is not currently electric. It's gas and coal and other things. But you can imagine that during a cold snap in the winter when there's not much sun, and if that cold snap happens to happen during a time when there's not very much wind blowing either, then you have a problem because you have a huge heating load and you don't have your clean energy sources. So what is the solution? He points to the fact that we all need to start treating the energy efficiency of our buildings like it really matters. Mainly that means insulation, air tightness, and good thoughtful architecture and design. And he specifically calls out passive house. So I talked a little bit about this concept of DERs, or distributed energy resources, that can include solar panels. It can also include building energy efficiency. And my last point on the importance of energy efficiency in the clean energy transition is that negawatts, you can imagine the energy efficiency services that are provided by, or the energy services that are provided by energy efficiency. The negawatts, it's a term coined by Amory Levins, are largest. The energy efficiency generates most negawatts at the exact moment when there's the most energy demand. So there's exact alignment between demand and generation of these negawatts. That's not necessarily the case with solar panels, right? My solar panels, I have solar panels on my roof, and they're generating some good energy right now. Our house is not necessarily consuming very much. So because of that alignment, negawatts are the ultimate DER. All right. So lots of exciting progress has happened in the last couple of decades around clean energy and clean buildings. Our economies are indeed becoming much more energy efficient, and we're moving to less and less carbon intensity. There's a lot of good stuff that's happened. And that means that, so back in 1990, the business as usual projection for warming was this scary top line here that goes to 5 degrees Celsius of warming by the end of the century, which would be completely catastrophic. So the good news is that we've made significant progress, and it's much lower. And remember, I've been talking about the International Energy Agency and ragging on them for how they've been missing the uptake of renewable energy. But even those guys are looking at this as more likely as where we're headed right now, perhaps a little bit higher, but around 2.5 degrees Celsius is what the projections from the International Energy Agency are showing. We've also seen a bunch of new announcements around pledges and targets around climate action from world governments and national governments. So China announced its 0 by 2060. Biden announced 0 by 2050. Germany just upped its ambition to 0 by 2045. There are lots and lots of other pledges around the world. And because of those pledges and targets, the Climate Action Tracker has updated its forecast and projections for where we're headed based on those pledges and targets to 2.4 degrees Celsius, even optimistically with net zero to 2 degrees Celsius. Am I okay?
Yeah,
okay, all right. So that's all. That is really good news, but it's not good enough. Here we are at 2.5 degrees Celsius. This comes from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, showing that at 2.5 degrees Celsius warming, we're putting unique and threatened systems at very high risk. So we're talking about coral reefs and the Amazon and Arctic ice and other systems are toast at 2.5 degrees Celsius. And remember the wet bulb temperature problem at 1.5 degrees Celsius in the tropics. Imagine how much of the tropics would be uninhabitable if we got to 2.5 degrees Celsius. So we need to do better. Oops. So here's where we are. We're in a race between the crisis and solutions. And it's a race that's occurring in extremistan. And it's a race that's characterized by exponential power and change. On the crisis side, we have these scary, vicious cycles that can accelerate climate destruction. But on the solution side, we also have this exponential power, and we have virtuous circles that we can be accelerating as practitioners. And we're seeing this happen with Swanson's law, right? The learning by doing. All of the downward costs that have been going on in renewable energy, and also in the cost delta with passive house, none of that has happened by accident. It's all thanks to little micro innovations that millions of people, honestly, around the world are making. So we're talking about engineers and physicists and chemists and architects and mechanical engineers and builders and tradespeople and component manufacturers and supply chain experts and policymakers and marketers, like all of them, as we're deploying these clean energy technologies and these buildings, we're all figuring out how to do them better and more cost effectively and make them the no-brainer choice and to accelerate the adoption of these technologies in these buildings. And so we on this call have more power than most to accelerate the kind of change that we need to see to create a secure climate future. And another thing that can help accelerate that is sharing stories, sharing innovation, sharing technologies. And that is what you have been doing at Building Science Friday. So that this is my celebration of you guys for the 52 weeks of work that you've been doing to bring together people to share their lessons learned and their wisdom and to move us forward in the way that we need to go. And it's something that I admire. It's something that I work really hard on at the Passive House Accelerator. And I'm honored to be part of the community. And thank you for having me here today to present.
Thank you so much, Zach. I mean, the children's book's on its way. So I think that's a great route as well, because we need to educate our youth. And again, thank you so much for celebrating our 52 weeks with us. And there's a couple more questions and comments, but we're just about out of time here. So if you can go back in, I'm gonna flash some names up because everybody likes to see their name and the questions real quick. Brad Begin says, great presentation, Zach. For every certified square foot of passive house project, there are multiples growing exponential of pH inspired projects. Any way you can think to measure that being true or quantifiable? And if you can go in after the show and answer that, that would be awesome. And then Harvey also had a comment there. Who are going to be drivers of the solar energy through big business transition, or is it others? If we can go back in after the show on that. We are out of time on this end. Mark, what do you got coming up next Friday? We got another big show.
So, Zach, as a leader in the industry, bless your heart for today. It was amazing. I request that everyone watch it again. And please share it. I took so many screenshots. I will be sharing them to the IG world, and so thank you, Zack, for what you do daily, as well as in the evenings. And Bob Kelly will join us for episode 53. Kelly sent
All right.
a package from Wickwright. I will post his latest presentation on Sunday evening, and we get to see him Friday. So Zack, thank you for all you do, and bless your heart, honestly.
Yeah,
Thanks, you
man.
guys. Thanks for having me. It was a
Yeah.
pleasure.
It's a pleasure having you, and everybody out there. Thank you for joining us. Also, join us tomorrow, Coffee with Dave, where we will review what happened this past week and what's coming up in the following weeks. And join us also Monday. We have the Han Richard Evans on the show from Octavius GB. It is a show you're not going to want to miss. Definitely going to take it to a whole nother level when it comes to why the world is not accepting the adoption of modern methods of construction. Are we in our own way? Find out on Monday, because is it a people problem? Is it a technology problem? It's going to be a great conversation. Really looking forward to it. And then we are heading to Utah. We will be at the house that she built on the 13th. And Mark, guess where else we're going? We're going to Ottovall in Idaho. We're going to live stream from the manufacturing floor because, Zack, we are now live streaming with the NAHB student chapter into universities across the country. So we have a lot of students that are now tuning in as part of their coursework, watching our show. So it's an amazing thing that's happening. And we hope that we can collaborate more and bring more to these students and really grow what's happening out there in the built environment. So thanks so much.
I just saw Autoball, Dave. You're going to love it. The work in Utah is going to be great. Zack, you have a blessed weekend. Dave, we'll see you for Coffee with Dave. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. And everybody else, have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye now.